Doing a prequel to Lord of the Rings outside of his core established work was always going to be difficult. But there's one thing that could make it even more difficult for anyone to actually pull off, and that is if you don't actually own the rights to do it. Yes, all the main stories that are around there just don't exist in your universe anymore because you can't actually talk about them. The Rings of Power showrunners admit they don't have the rights to the Silmarillion or the Unfinished Tales, and that's where it comes from here in this Vanity Fair article. So Vanity Fair asks, what exactly is the source material to your show? And Amazon say, we have the rights solely to the Fellowship of the Ring, the Two Towers, the Return of the King, the Appendices, which is a significant part of it, and The Hobbit. And that's it. We don't have the rights to the Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, the History of Middle-earth, or any of those other books. And this, for me, makes what they've done even worse. I can understand if there's big gaps in a history, you need to make up some stories, or because, you know, you want to actually just make something have a bit more pace to it, you make something up to add that into the show as well. I do get that. But if you're going to be making up like 98% of the source material anyway, simply because you don't have any rights to it, then that 2% becomes even more important, doesn't it? Because you're making a show which is supposed to feel like Lord of the Rings, and yet you're not even bringing much Lord of the Rings into your show. So the only things you have are the atmosphere, the environment, and the few characters which you actually have the right to put in. And yet they're changing them as well. That's why when they say this takes a huge chunk of lore off the table and has left Tolkien fans wondering how this duo plans to tell the Second Age without access to those materials. And they replied, there's a version of everything we need in the Second Age and the books that we have the rights to. Everything they need. Need for what? Need to tell their story. Not Tolkien's story. They make that very clear later on. No, this is to tell theirs. This is why they'll change anything. Because it's important. It needs to look like the world around us. Why would it need to feel like Lord of the Rings? When it already isn't. There's no Lord of the Rings in this because it's not based on anything. There's a point when it comes to people where you're like, I'll set a line and I don't want to cross it. Say, like, I don't want to eat chocolate. But then you break that line and you eat the first bite of chocolate. Before you know it, you've eaten the entire bar, because once we go past a step, everything else after that becomes a lot easier to do when you've already done it. So I can understand them getting into a point where they're like, well, we're already making up 98% of what we're already doing. Doesn't really make that last 2% very important, does it? It doesn't seem like it compared to the bulk of your work. This, to me, really explains the arrogance of how they treated the show. How it doesn't seem like Lord of the Rings is very important for it. You know why? It's just that stuff they've made up anyway. Of course they don't mind changing the rest. If everything's your creation, why not create the last 2% as well? And that's what makes this sentence all the worse. As long as we're painting within those lines and not egregiously contradicting something, so they're more than willing to contradict something. As long as they don't do it too egregiously, yes, we'll change things, we'll knock it about, we'll make all of the law wrong, right up into the point where we'll get sued, and then we'll just pull back slightly. Contradicting something that we don't have the rights to, there's a lot of leeway and room to dramatize and tell some of the best stories that Tolkien ever came up with. Except Tolkien didn't come up with any of these stories, did he? Because anything he did, you don't actually have the rights to. And I can understand why when you're making up 98% of something anyway, you feel like, oh, that last 2% doesn't matter. That's fine. That's fine. When really, it's the only thing that gives your show any integrity, any identity, any soul. And yet they've changed that as well. Only in the tiny little fraction of content that we've already seen. And that is the thing. They were proud of this. They were proud of their changes. They were proud of taking the tiny bit of lore they have the rights to and just destroying them for all to see because they thought they would like them. And why did they do that? What did they think gave them the permission to do that? We worked in conjunction with world-renowned Tolkien scholars and the Tolkien estate to make sure that the ways we connected the dots were Tolkienian and gelled with the experts and the estate's understanding of the materials. Yes, these people are world-renowned Tolkien scholars. I mean, they've watched the movies at least twice. These people definitely know what they're talking about and certainly aren't taken by any weird ideological bents just to try and, I don't know, interpret or misinterpret things in a certain way. No, it's fine. Obviously, if we rewrite this entire character, it's fine. because it more represents our world. It doesn't show them anything to do with the actual Tolkien world, and I don't even know who these supposed experts are. Oh, so you've read his books and watched his movies. Congratulations. Welcome to half the world. So you can come out here and call yourself a world-renowned Tolkien scholar and an expert. But the simple fact is, if either of those things were true, you wouldn't have let this mess actually happen in the first place. You wouldn't have stood for it, because you know that they're perverting Tolkien and what he actually stood for. That's why I'm not surprised to find out they had issues with some of these supposed expert Tolkien scholars in the past, as when they make comments like, can we come up with the novel Tolkien never wrote? No, but they did have issues with one of the Tolkien scholars. It says, the production canned Tolkien scholar Tom Shippy. It's unclear why he was canned. Vanity Fair suggested that it was over an NDA breach, claiming that he gave an apparently unsanctioned interview to a German fan site that July, opining on what the show could and could not explore. Not long after that, Shippy was no longer with the series. This was a guy who loved the lore so much he just went round fan sites talking about it. And yet, he got fired for it. Why? Because he was letting the cat out of the bag, at least according to Vanity Fair. He was talking about what they didn't have the rights to and Amazon didn't want people to know. Why? Well, it may well destroy the hype when people find out that you're making a Lord of the Rings show which isn't based on Lord of the Rings. And that is why they changed the core fundamentals, because they wanted to write the book that Tolkien never did. Because they think they have a superior message, that they have a superior talent to him. So they don't care about changing the 2%, because their 98% they think is better than anything he could have done anyway. Tolkien didn't represent the world. Tolkien didn't add all of this extra modernization into his books, but they have. And to them, that makes them superior. That makes them better and more talented, because it's not about the quality of what you're saying. It's about the message that you happen to be pushing. That's what they care about. That is what Amazon cares about. And nothing makes it more clear than all of the shows they ever put out. This isn't one example of it. There's plenty more that Amazon and other companies have done in the past. This is just the largest one, the latest one, and that's why it's made so much noise. There comes a point where you've annoyed a lot of people, but you've annoyed all of these tiny fan bases. And then together you choose a property which is so large, so widely loved, that all of those tiny people come together, and that is why you've seen the backlash that you have, one that no one was ready for. And honestly, there may be many months until the TV series appears, but I just really hope it continues, because at the end of the day, that is the only chance this show has of actually being turned into anything good. If there is so much prolonged angst about what they've already changed, that in future series they think, maybe we shouldn't do that again. But let me know your thoughts on it down below. If you like the video, press like, subscribe, more videos like this in the future. But for now, that's it from me. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.